Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast for NFL Week 11. Marquee matchups all over the place this weekend. Key players coming back from injury or coming off the bye. So a lot to get to, including a Super Bowl rematch Monday night. Let's start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast for NFL Week 11. I'm John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. This podcast is presented by our friends over at Circa and our friends over at Splash Sports. Mario, I got to see you in person yesterday. I was up at the RotoWire HQ.
Yeah. For those listening, John was in, was it baseball stake league?
That's
baseball,
right.
Baseball stake league with RotoWire. So the RotoWire original, or at least central division payment place where you pay the stake that you owe or receive the stake you are owed is Tornado Room up on the Capitol Square. So that's why John is was not in Georgia and is back there today.
That's right. So a quick little jaunt up to one of my favorite places in the world and one of my favorite restaurants in the world too. And great to see all the RotoWire HQ guys. Really good time. But, now we press on. We got an amazing Week 11 slate. Like I'm not even just saying that. We've got awesome games across the board. A couple teams on bye, of course, but not quite of the level of fantasy consequence that what we were dealing with last week when the Chiefs and the Dolphins and the Eagles and the Rams were off. A little bit lighter that way this week, but we have an awesome Thursday night game to kick off the weekend. And Mario, let me tell you, I'm pretty nervous about this one. This is the Ravens playing host to the Bengals. Both teams coming off of losses at home. Both of them, I think it was 2 of the 5 games that were decided with 0 seconds left on the clock. Both the Ravens lost on a game-winning field goal, and the Bengals did as well to the Texans. So this is a huge spot for both of these teams. I feel like if you're looking at the standings, if the Bengals are able to win this evening, you're looking at a team that now has 6 wins, has leveled the score with the Ravens on the season series, and has handed out the Ravens a 4th loss on their season. But if the shoe's on the other foot and the Ravens win, the Bengals are going to have a very difficult climb if they want to win this division. I still feel like if they lose this evening, that I think that they still have that run in them where they're probably going to make some noise here down the stretch, but they might end up with a much lower seed. So a lot on the line this evening. The spread in this one pretty standard. When 2 fairly even teams are squaring off, the home team, the Ravens, 3.5 point favorites in this matchup. Your thoughts?
Well, I think the Ravens are probably going to lose because it says the team website, Marlon Humphrey and Ronnie Stanley did not practice this week. So I don't know what either one was declared. It doesn't really matter to me, especially because both of those guys have been hurt for so long at this point, especially Stanley. It's like, if that guy is missing practice time, there's no way I'm going to assume the good case scenario. I don't know what basis there is for that. So if Ronnie Stanley, the left tackle, and if the cornerback one, Humphrey, are less than what the Ravens had become accustomed to, especially Stanley. I mean, I know Humphrey was out most of the year anyway, but being without Stanley takes that offense down so quickly. And I, of course, am still kind of not sold on this Ravens offense. I know they've had their good points, but to me, all the good things that have come out of the Ravens offense this year, other than Keaton Mitchell, is just standard Lamar stuff. And there was a need for more than standard Lamar stuff, and just getting rid of Roman, that's a start. Getting Odell Beckham over Demarcus Robinson is kind of a start. Yeah, Zay Flowers over Willie Snead is kind of a start, but it's still not much to me. And the Bengals, on the other hand, even without Higgins, I think have much more firepower on offense just because of Jamar Chase versus X. It doesn't matter who he's going against. He's got a huge advantage over them in a way that no one on the Ravens offense has. They're making Mark Andrews less effective.
Yep.
It's all bad. And the Ravens have the very simple fact is the Ravens need to get more explosiveness on offense, or they can't hang with a team like the Bengals when the Bengals have Jamar Chase and even without T. Higgins.
Right. So I think Burrow is going to rise to the occasion here. I do expect that the Bengals to win. It definitely hurts to not have Marlon Humphrey in this one. Seems like he dodged anything super long term, but he is doubtful for this evening. That was a scary moment when he just goes down, non-contact, nobody around him. But it's just a calf strain, not the dreaded Achilles. But yes, Ronnie Stanley will not be playing in this one. We've got some questionable players that are pretty important too. I mean, John Simpson on the offensive line has been okay. Kyle Van Noy has been dealing with the groin this week, so that those are concerns as well. That not that the Bengals are coming into this fully healthy. Although Trey Hendrickson didn't even carry an injury designation after, I think, hyperextending his knee on Sunday. So if he's full go against a backup tackle, that could definitely be an issue. What do you think about, there was a lot of hemming and hawing coming out of Charm City on Monday about the lack of usage of one Keaton Mitchell. And I swear we're not just placating ourselves because we're Keaton Mitchell guys, but he does what he does in the first half of that game against the Browns and then just disappears. I thought that last weekend was about as bad of a offensive coordinator performance from Todd Monken as we've seen thus far in his time with Baltimore. It was clunky. It was bad. It was not imaginative. It was wrong-headed a lot of the time.
Yeah, to me, it looks as simple as they're putting Justice Hill out there for pretty much every pass blocking snap, and I don't know why. Like I can't. I will never understand why coaches act like 6 to 8 pass blocking reps is more important than the net effect from scrimmage of putting a superior ball carrier and pass catcher on those reps instead. Like the defense doesn't just every time try to send one extra rusher than there are pass blockers and thus are always planning on there being a pass blocker. Like if you put a guy like Keaton Mitchell out there and just have him run a route instead of having him do the blitz pickup, I would assume the defense would be like, oh crap, they're throwing it to Mitchell. It's not just Hill who's in there. This is worse for us. It's like, just if it's like a deep drop thing, like a 7-step drop, a play action kind of thing, that just seems like a Gus Edwards kind of blitz pickup to me anyway, because you're not running with Justice Hill. So you don't have the play action set up with Justice Hill, not a credible one anyway. So as to why they would do it, I just don't know, other than, that ostensibly the pass blocking thing. And I can never be the person to tell you why that's important. It doesn't make sense to me. So on the one hand, I would agree, like they should just give Keaton Mitchell more snaps, or at least every single snap that would otherwise go to Justice Hill. I think Gus Edwards is still, he can't do as much damage in any given play as Keaton Mitchell, but he picks up enough plays that they need picked up that he's more useful than Mitchell overall. So to me, it makes sense, just have Gus, especially because there's such a contrast between them. It's like you tenderize the defense with Gus Edwards. You get their shoulders and knees sore tackling him, and then you put out Keaton Mitchell and say, okay, now just chase this guy. Now that you're sore and stumbling a little, go chase this. Like that makes perfectly good sense. I won't ever understand what I tend to believe. If I really have to say like an answer, I just tend to believe coaches are just kind of full of it and are being at best superstitious and like overly cautious. It's a little bit analogous to the whole Andy Reid being like, wow, Rashee Rice is getting better every week. It's like, no, you're just increasing his snap count every week. Like the thing that you're worried about, the thing that the like bad case scenario you're guarding against doesn't exist, or if it does, you're bringing it about with your current plan. Like you putting your lesser player on the field is what makes the bad thing you fear happen sooner than putting the better player on the field. So I guess I'm oversimplifying it, but as to why the Ravens wouldn't use Mitchell more from this point, I have no idea, especially since if they're gonna acknowledge the intention of getting them the ball more. It's like, why would they say that if, now it's going to be easier yet to hold that quote over their head about it if they don't follow through.
No, exactly. So, yeah, they're in a tricky spot here. The Ravens' best games have come against NFC teams, and they banked the early wins against a banged up Joe Burrow and a Deshaun Watson-less Cleveland team. Both of those games on the road, but now the Ravens have a chance to completely negate the strides that they took in September in that regard, and give up that kind of divisional advantage with those road divisional wins by losing 2 divisional games at home in a span of 4 days. And that's kind of where I'm leaning with this one. So I do like the Bengals this evening. Any other fantasy notes on the Bengals side with T. Higgins being out? Any kind of secondary pass catchers that you think might be in a good spot?
Well, I was surprised at how big of a game Tyler Boyd had. I know he dropped that one pass, but it's like they wouldn't have been moving the ball the way they did if he wasn't making all those other plays. So if anyone thinks that, the Bengals should cut the playing time of Tyler Boyd and give it to Trenton Irwin instead, that's one of those things where the solution is a lot worse than the problem. Irwin, I know he had that touchdown. I know he's got some kind of amount of like craftiness, but that's only the case because it's like he has no real talent. It's like he's got to be crafty because otherwise he's got nothing. So I admit it is a narrow channel that the Bengals passing game has to work through. Like I think Boyd's pretty good, but Jamar Chase kind of needs to have a big game at receiver. I just think that's totally easy to see like happening. It's not like such a stretch to imagine 140 yards for Chase here.
It's happened in Baltimore before, and it certainly could happen again this evening. Before we move on over to the Sunday slate, we got a message from our friends over at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more, or touchdown at the world's largest sportsbook, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. I will say the sliders at the pool at Stadium Swim, tremendous. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. We also get a message from our friends over at Splash. RotoWire is proud to partner with Splash Sports for the 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests, add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles such as DFS, Pickaxe, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sportsbooks, Splash Sports pits you against your friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tiers contests on Splash Sports all season. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash to enter today. And finally, a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. And we're on to Sunday. Well, we just had just broke down one of the marquee games of this weekend. This one, maybe a little less so, but I don't mean to undersell it too much. There's still some fantasy intrigue, of course, to be had here. We've got the Dallas Cowboys going up against the Carolina Panthers. The Cowboys 10.5-point favorites on the road in this one. The over-under set at 41.5 at FanDuel, 42.5 over at DraftKings. I don't mean to say that I've completely figured out the Cowboys, but it feels like there's just this long-standing trend with them where they're going to, outside of the Cardinals games, if it's a bad team, they're going to stomp them. And if it's a good team, it gets a little bit dicier for them. But the Panthers certainly fall in that first bucket. And therefore,
yeah,
I mean, we say the 10.5-point spread on the road and I like the Cowboys to cover it. Like I just don't see how the Panthers, even with a little bit of a rest advantage in this one, doing much of anything.
Yeah, I think Dallas can screw up against some lesser teams, but the second part of what you said is definitely true. Like good teams, they do not tend to play well against. However, I agree totally that I would be shocked if Dallas doesn't cover. Like that's the main reason to think Dallas won't cover is that I think they will by a lot. And the reason I think they will by a lot is that uh short of Andy Dalton playing quarterback, I don't think the Panthers can score 14 points against Dallas. And even then it's like how lucky are you feeling with that one? You know, it's like Andy Dalton is a turnover machine too. Just because he's a lot better than Bryce Young right now doesn't mean that he's a competitive quarterback either. It's like Andy Dalton's better than like Derek Carr and Bryce Young and maybe like Kenny Pickett, and that's about all. And that's supposed to go, leaving out the Tommy DeVito ridiculous cases like that. And this guy's supposed to go against the Bryce Young is supposed to go against this Dallas defense. No, the whole thing with Bryce Young to this point, it's not his fault exactly. It's kind of frustrating to watch because you can see it's just not fair really, but he doesn't have the physical requirements to hold up at this game. It's like he being as small as he is, being as slight as he is, he needs to have a stronger arm than he has. He can't just be tiny and finesse. And Dallas is just on defense everywhere at once. They're everywhere and they're getting closer all the time. And you don't have much time no matter what the situation is. These variables have been more in Young's favor throughout various points of the year, and he still is just crashing, burning constantly. So this could be the game where they I don't know if this has already happened, but they might bench Bryce Young at like halftime of this game because he goes into the third quarter with like 4 interceptions and they just need to throw in the towel basically.
Right. And sort of at that point, the mental damage of four interceptions is enough, but you can't risk any more on that front. I guess on the Dallas side, we do have some interesting fantasy points because, they're the viral tweet yesterday, which I did find pretty funny, where Yahoo Fantasy tweets out, you can drop Tony Pollard now if you want to. He's no longer on the undroppable list over at Yahoo.
Yeah, that's crazy. I really thought Pollard was going to get going against the Giants, and despite being wrong about that, it's like the reasoning that I was using still applies even a week later. I guess what I'm struggling to balance with the assumption that Pollard, eventually resurges, that balancing that assumption, which I think is correct. And especially with a game like this, it's a really good setting. It's like, how do I balance that probably true assumption with the constantly emerging understanding that, yeah, Tony Pollard basically was an illusion before. And now it's like, we're trying to balance the despair of him being kind of a fraud fantasy asset versus going too far into despair and believing something ridiculous that now Tony Pollard isn't even an average runner. It's like average runners don't go as cold as long as he has unless they've just had bad luck basically. And I think he's had bad luck in addition to other things turning against his favor that used to be so in his favor. But this is again a circumstance where so many things are in his favor. It's like there's no way, right, that he could go against the Tommy DeVito Giants, a game where the Dallas offense generally went nuts, and then a game against these Panthers, who have probably the worst run defense. I know they did okay against the Colts. I admittedly don't have a good explanation for how that happened, but
I don't either.
Aside from that, the Panthers' run defense has probably been the worst in the league, and we know Dallas is going to be in scoring range, doing whatever they want on offense in this game. So Pollard has to get going in this one. But the whole idea of him being like a 5 yards a carry, 280 rush attempt, 60 catch receiver, running back, that was always ridiculous. And it's not going to stop this kind of bad analysis from happening in the future, John. But it just shows there's way too common of a running back analysis, running back projection method where people just, scale up. They just multiply the snaps by whatever. It's like, that's not how it works. There's more conditions you have to account for than that.
In like fantasy college football, like it's a little bit easier to see it. Like when the starter goes out, like the next guy is for the most part, if the things look relatively similar, like he can scale up. But the NFL level, it's just that his running style is so different than what Zeke was doing there in Dallas. And yeah, I mean, it was clear that he was just sort of the change of pace guy that was getting put in favorable setups and succeeding in them. But now when he has to carry the load, it just doesn't look remotely the same. Do you have any lingering interest in like Rico Dowdle? Do you think that he's someone that could be like a flex option this weekend?
Well, I guess he could be, in the sense that he would have been an okay flex outcome in week 10 and in week 3, but I don't think Dowdle can play, really. I think he's the kind of guy who, he's fine if you're giving him 20 snaps a game or less than that, ideally. But if Dallas ever found themselves in a situation, basically if they found themselves without Pollard, they'd realize all of a sudden, like, oh, Dowdle's not going to cut it. So
Right.
The flex thing is, if he gets in the end zone, if he gets a long run or whatever, both of which are possible. Again, the Panthers probably won't have the ball very much in this game, and Dallas will have the ball a lot in favorable field positioning. So Dowdle is definitely around to pick up any scraps. I just think as good as he's done, and he deserves credit for how he's done, you have to keep the full prospect profile in mind with these guys, especially these guys who haven't played much in the NFL. Like, you got to remember who they were in college, because Deion Jackson, this is a great case of this. He fumbled like 15 times at Duke and then hadn't fumbled in the NFL except for one time or whatever. And then after, going through last year, mostly okay, going through the first 2 or 3 games this year or whatever, mostly okay, he had like 3 or 4 fumbles and then got cut for it. That was a tendency he showed at Duke and not in the NFL, but only because he didn't get a chance to show it again in the NFL. Dowdle has a long history of fumbling. Dowdle has a long history of being a like memorably stone-handed pass catcher. And Dowdle also has a really extensive injury history because he kind of runs kamikaze. He does the Chris Ivory kind of running style. So there's the flex thing there, but it's chasing points as I see it, and I definitely don't think he's a handcuff.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yeah, I'm not interested in Dowdle for dynasty purposes, but at this stage of the season, if you need points,
he's better than Malik Davis, whatever that turns into.
Right. Exactly. So I mean, there's potential there. And then lastly, Brandon Cooks had the huge game. He's scored a touchdown actually in 3 of the last 4. Do we like his setup again this week?
Yeah, sometimes these things, I guess, if we're being generous to Mike McCarthy, and I don't want to be, then if we're being generous anyway, then you would say like, oh, Brandon Cooks needed time to work with Dak Prescott and work with the system or whatever. And I don't know. I think that how do I say this? I don't think that holds as easily, since CeeDee Lamb has also gotten hot lately and was needlessly cold beforehand. It's like, was CeeDee Lamb new to the system in those 4 of the prior weeks to the last 2? It's like, no, Dallas just wasn't doing things they should have been doing. And which is, for me to say anyway, Mike McCarthy not doing something that he should have, and then under the pressure of failure, the threat of accountability, being held accountable for that failure, they started doing different things on offense. And in the case of CeeDee Lamb, it was just throw to him more, stupid. Just throw him the ball, stupid. And, they did that and it started working. And I think they kind of finally had the same realization occur about Brandon Cooks. It's like, hey, what if we actually just try to use him instead of getting cute with like using him as a decoy so we can free up Kevontae Turpin and Jalen Tolbert and Jake Ferguson? Like, no, Brandon Cooks is not a decoy receiver. Throw him the ball, stupid. Just throw him the ball. And we saw in the game, it was like, oh, right, he's Brandon Cooks. I remember him.
Yeah, and so he absolutely cooked last week, for lack of a better word. And, I feel like that this could be another great spot for him. And then on the other side of this, if we're taking kind of a longer view, you got Washington and Seattle over the next 2 weeks after this one. So, I mean, this could be something where Cooks can really help some teams get over the hump in the fantasy playoffs. So I am a believer in him here going forward. This Dallas offense is kind of making me eat my words. I'm definitely underweight on CeeDee Lamb in best ball and in redraft, and having some pretty big regrets there, definitely. Let's move on over. We got an AFC North battle between the Steelers and the Browns. Big news coming out of Cleveland yesterday where Deshaun Watson ruled out for the remainder of the season. This, of course, one day after I was in a state with legalized sports betting, and being as impressed as I was with Cleveland on Sunday, I said, hey, I think this team can win the division. And you know what? I like the odds enough. I'll throw down a little bit on them to win the AFC. And now Watson's out, so those are deader than disco. But I'm trying to just press on here. But what are we expecting in this game? The line is now the Browns favored by a 0.5 point.
Yeah, man, you've been forsaken by the football gods. You're a tragic, like mythical tale at this point as a Ravens fan, like just tilting so hard after losing to the Browns that you're just like, well, maybe my
got to be amazing, right?
Yeah, maybe my pain can yet turn into something, meaningful. It's like, no, just burning whatever that money is, and now you got to watch them lose to the Bengals too. So anyway, that was bad luck though, and the Browns clearly. They're not the smoothest operation, but they have some significant amount of talent. And going from Watson to Walker, or Dorian Thompson Robinson has to be better than Walker, like we were saying before. But it's still just like they suck now. So that's too bad. Of course, sorry about your bet and Ravens both, John. I don't know what to make of Kenny Pickett versus this Browns defense. The Browns defense is pretty gnarly, but. Oh man, this is a tough one for me, John. Really making me prove just how serious I am about this Kenny Pickett hate and him being a slot receiver rather than a quarterback. I don't know for sure if I can convince myself that Pickett is worse than Thompson Robinson. I was never a big Thompson Robinson guy, so that I've always been really low on Pickett. It's not as easy for me to just. Like I would assume Mitchell Trubisky is better than Pickett at this point, but not Thompson Robinson. So
yeah, I mean, it's two different categories completely. Like Pickett, but it's debatable whether he should have been a first-round pick, right? But Thompson Robinson was always going to be a day 3 guy.
Yeah. So the usual reason that I would have to question the Steelers only loosely applies here, if it applies at all, and. Granted, I'm probably liable to overestimate the Tomlin effect, especially since the Browns defense should be good, almost unconditionally, So it's like, how do I even do I believe that the Browns can't get to 17 points, because that's all it might take. This might be a really low scoring game from the Steelers. I don't know. I got to go with the Steelers, I guess, just because. I'm not really big on Thompson Robinson. Definitely think he's better than PJ Walker. I'll give him that. But I just worry that the Steelers defense, especially with getting Porter at corner now, it's like that's an interesting variable, having a truly good corner in that defense. That's something they've never really done. So yeah, it's a tough setup, and the Browns defense can win it. It's just I think they have to, pretty much.
Right, they absolutely do. I kind of believe that they do have that horsepower to do it. That was a serious looking bunch. Getting a close look at them on Sunday, and I felt like the Browns are they're a tremendously physical team. Like I think they're even more physical than the Steelers themselves. I mean, they David Njoku just mosh pitting his way into yards after catch, just having guys fly off of him, wiping away Patrick Queen like he's a mosquito type of deal. So I mean, maybe there's a way here. I mean, going forward, I'm concerned about what the Amari Cooper and David Njoku shares look like. I think both of them. I looked at some splits for when Watson was out and when he was in. The target share is about the same, but the productivity obviously takes a huge dip when Deshaun Watson's out. So that's obviously a bit of a concern. But yeah, as bad as Kenny Pickett is, probably has the slight quarterback advantage here, but I don't know if that really means that he's going to like actually have the better game here. I mean, he's
That's
had
fair.
all of one passing touchdown since the bye week in week
Yeah, he
6.
sucks.
He's really bad.
He's really bad. Yeah, man. I don't know. I guess this is one of those games that I wouldn't really want to pick because it is probably going to come down to just turnovers. And how do you guess who has a turnover a turnover advantage in a game like this? So it's like Kenny Pickett versus Thompson Robinson. Kenny Pickett versus what might be the best defense in the league, more specifically against Dorian Thompson Robinson. I don't know. I'll say Steelers again, but it's just if Kenny Pickett fumbles 3 times and Myles Garrett picks one up for a touchdown and it's like a 13-7 win, that would not be the kind of thing where I'm like, oh my God, how'd this happen?
What's crazy is, and I still believe that the correction could come here, but Pickett has only fumbled once this year, and it wasn't even a lost fumble, and he's not thrown an interception since week 4. So maybe
check his hands. Check his hands for pine tar.
I think we need to. Something's got to be up there.
Check the brim of his helmet.
He's spider tacking out there.
Yeah. His chin strap is contraband.
I'm also suspect on I think it's Aiden O'Connell's chin strap. What's going on there? It's like way too big. Just covers like the entire mandible.
Maybe like mustache support or something.
A mustache doesn't need that kind of support. It stands on its own. As someone who has a mustache. But mostly
some kind of concussion thing, I guess, with the mustache concussion safety.
That's got to be it. Either way, if I'm picking this game, I'm probably just taking the under.
There we go.
33 at BetMGM. I'll take the under. I think this is like
3-2-3 overtime tie.
Folks, there we have it. Let's get on over to the NFC North. We've got the Bears going up to Detroit to face the Lions. The Lions 7.5 point favorites in this one. And looking at Justin Fields, his status, he is fully practicing. So I think all indications are that he is going to take back over the Tyson Bagent era over for now.
Well, it was a good run for racist Chicago area sports writers, but their party is over. The real starting quarterback of the Bears is healthy enough to play, and so now the fan fiction about Tyson Purdy is gonna have to be put on hold at the very least. We're doing that story is gonna get the George R.R. Martin treatment. Just gonna leave that, never come back to it. Gonna pretend it's going fine if anyone asks. But the Tyson Bagent hype is over. It's too bad that this isn't an easier defense for Fields to return against. It wouldn't be shocking if he has some amount of rust from this long of a layoff. And the Bears are still, a horrendously run team. So they will get out coached here. They'll get out coached real badly. The question is kind of like, how much does Detroit feel like, unleashing here? And since it's on the road, or sorry, though, this one's in Detroit. I guess the Bears, the Lions should be able to roll here without doing a whole lot, is how I see it. Like Justin Fields, if you keep him from running for 120 yards, you probably don't need that big of a game from your own offense. So, whereas if the Lions really wanted to put 40 points on the board here, I think they could. I think they simply don't need to, or might not feel that level of urgency. So, Jared Goff's going to have a good game. The running game for the Lions certainly seems difficult to screw up at this point. Knock on wood. So, I guess they can just do a lot of like base offense, just like get 32 carries split up between Montgomery and Gibbs, keep Goff in, some of the more primitive play action designs. You don't need to go deep in the playbook to move the ball against this defense. And they should just kind of roll on offense. And from there, I guess it's tougher to say like how much can Fields strike back, because I think Aaron Glenn's a really good defensive coordinator. And I think while I have questions about the Detroit like corner personnel, especially, I don't worry about them in a setting like this. I would worry about those guys against a vertically oriented offense, an offense run by a coach who won't be fired in a month and a half from now. So I think that the Bears, it's great for Fields to be back, but they're just too stupid of a team to compete with teams like the Lions at this point.
Correct. I think that's where I land on it as well. Fields, we have him ranked as QB 19 for this week. I tend to agree with that. I have a lot of Fields in redraft. I'm not trying to start him if I don't have to this weekend.
Yeah, it's I don't really want to bet against him specifically, but if you have a decent alternative at quarterback, it's pretty, especially in the floor sense, it's pretty difficult to advocate for Fields there.
Yeah, I think so as well. So, in places where, and as I often do, I have Sam Howell and Justin Fields. I'm probably starting Howell for at least this week. I need to see what
That's
Fields
crazy.
looks like again.
Can you believe this world, John?
Well, I can. Big
Well, I
Howell.
know you can, but yeah, it's like Howell's gonna throw for like 5,000 yards. This is wacky.
It's unbelievable while getting sacked a million times. Although that's
Yes.
gotten cleaned up at least a little bit over the last few weeks, but still crazy. Let's keep rocking here. We've got the Packers hosting the Chargers. Chargers 3-point favorites on the road here against the moribund Green Bay Packers. The Chargers need this one badly. I don't think that really matters in the grand scheme, but I do think the Packers are just enough of a mess to
They're
where,
so bad.
yeah, I think the Chargers do go in there and take care of business personally.
Yeah, I'm checking the forecast. It's apparently going to be in like the 40s. So no, it's cold at Lambeau concerns. I'm pretty sure Justin Herbert will be just fine. And yeah, man, the Packers just suck. They can barely run, just basic plays. It's a total mess.
It's no bueno. They're about as tough of a watch out there as any. What do you think of Aaron Jones this week, though? I mean, we've been waiting for him to have the big game. He was limited at Wednesday's walkthrough. He generally has been seeing slightly more carries of late. Didn't have much in the way of success last week against the Steelers, drawing at least 5 targets every week since the bye. But the rushing had the 20 carries against the Rams, got the touchdown in that one, regressed last week. But the Chargers, I mean, you were just talking about the Lions backfield. I know the Lions backfield on balance better than what Green Bay has right now, but you still feel like this has to be a pretty good setup for Jones, no?
It should be, and I definitely am a big fan of Aaron Jones. What I'm worried about is that he's hurt still, and I also worry that Matt LaFleur is getting so desperate that I worry that he's not being as selective and clever with his Jones usage. I think it's like at this point, LaFleur is just kind of giving the ball to Jones a bunch just because he knows, like, I have to start getting the ball to my best player and hope that that player just sort of gets me out of this. And their problems are bigger than that. Like even prime Aaron Jones with the perfectly sound hamstring can't fix the things that are wrong with the Packers. And I wouldn't be surprised if LaFleur is just kind of like disheveled by it all. It's like, it's one thing to be on the ball when, it's almost like, like a quarterback, like when you're in a really easy offense with a great offensive line, great play calling, you can look like Brock Purdy, or you can take Trevor Lawrence and make him look like he has this year by just making everything just fall apart and be off rhythm with the Jags. And it's like, even as someone who thinks LaFleur is probably a pretty good offensive coach, he isn't one right now. And it's like, what do they have left? Like Aaron Jones, that's it. With a injured Aaron Jones with an injured crap offensive line is what they have left. And that's not the same as true Aaron Jones,
Right, exactly. And then on the other side, I mean, the overall fantasy production has been fine for Austin Eckler since returning from his injury earlier. But man, okay, so since the bye, 5 games, 76 rushing attempts. He's averaging 2.8 yards per carry. What's going on there?
I think it's mostly just the matchups, but like with even I guess you'd say the worst one is the Bears of those, otherwise the Lions. And I'm pretty sure that all of the defenses that he's faced since coming back from the injury in week 6 are top 10 run defenses. And this is all within the context of the Chargers being a bad rushing offense to start with, a predictable offense to start with. So you're not really seeing Eckler get any space as a runner, but you can tell it's not really his fault because his pass catching returns have been pretty much the same. It's like the difference being in one situation, the space exists. And when he gets the ball, he exploits that space. Whereas in the case of his rushing production, it's like he can't do anything with this. No one can really do anything with this. And, not short of playing the Dolphins, like they did in week 1, he's probably not going to get big rushing lanes this year. It's just not really, it's not what the Chargers are built for, and it shows. So the pass catching, he'll remain dependent on, I think. The touchdown should be there as a runner, though. I guess there's that. And this game, in particular, seems like a good setup for that because Jordan Love versus that pass rush is the kind of thing that can go very wrong, even though the Chargers corners aren't very good.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, we've seen that Chargers pass rush, it didn't do a ton last weekend. Obviously, the Lions got whatever they wanted, but against lesser offensive lines like the Jets on Monday Night Football a couple weeks ago, like they can just kind of take over a game and shut down an offense. So that is a definite concern when it comes to the Packers. And then lastly, Keenan Allen pops up on the injury report. And even kind of independent of that, do you think that last week was the start of something in terms of Quentin Johnston having a pulse for fantasy?
That's tough because I don't know. I mean, it was a good enough kind of game, I guess, but 4 targets on 57 snaps still isn't very good. And it's not looking to me like they use Johnston in any way that makes sense to them. Even it's like they're just kind of throwing him out there and hoping something happens. Whereas I think you can find examples of other players, certainly in other offenses, where it's like this offense is totally in tune with what this player does, what this player can do. They've really got it figured out. They've got him tuned up in the offense. It's all going great. Like when I look at this game from last week with Johnson, I worry it's just kind of like this is what was going to happen with almost anyone running those routes in that game where Justin Herbert throws that many passes. I don't know if they're using Johnston in the way that he basically should be, and this is something that I should have known would be a problem, and it's something I lose. Not that I ever had faith in Brandon Staley figuring out anything in particular, but I'm getting more and more despairing about it. I don't think Brandon Staley has any interest in using Johnston in a way according with his skill set. Like even if he could, I don't think Staley has any interest in doing it. So when whereas Johnston maybe lacks dimensions to his game and needs to kind of be a downfield specialist, be a sideline specialist. Maybe he can't run 8-yard in routes with excellent hip dips and breaking out of his cut, like maybe that kind of stuff Johnson's not good at. Staley will still just tell him to do it anyway, and I don't see them building around or building a role for Johnson that suits his abilities. It's like, to me, they're just gonna kind of go like run that Josh Palmer route and then get mad at him that he's not Josh Palmer. So I don't know. Maybe Johnson's just trash and I'm like, slow to pick up on it. But I, particularly since Staley has just kind of this history at this point to me, I just am not inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt over Johnston. However, until Staley's gone, what's going to change for either of them?
No, exactly. So, I mean, it's going to be, even though he shows the pulse last week, it's hard to feel confident about starting him this week. If Keenan Allen is out, do you raise the projection even still, or do you think that like all of a sudden it's just like a big rug pull where like
Austin it might be more like the Jets game where you just lower Herbert's projection? But so if I can point to one thing that would have changed my mind about last week, if Johnston had caught if those 4 targets had occurred on like 25 snaps, and if he had caught 4 passes for 58 or 60 yards, I would have been like, hey, look at that. They're getting him going on some post routes. They're getting him open on some fly routes. They're getting him open on a corner route, something like that. But it looks like he just caught short passes, which he normally can't be relied on to do. And I worry, like, with when that gets taken away, what's left then?
Right. No, exactly. Let's go ahead. Let's grab a question here. This one's interesting one, kind of tricky. A couple moving parts and pieces in it. Is it crazy to play Howell against the Giants, or would it be crazy to play Howell over Joe Burrow this week? And mind you, that this person, Jelly of the Month, the username, has Baltimore as his defense, could pivot off of the Baltimore defense. I would start the Miami defense over the Baltimore defense anyway, because Miami has they're coming off the bye and they're playing the Raiders, so feel okay about that defense. But Burrow versus Howell, it is tricky. I probably start Burrow even with like the softer matchup on paper for Howell.
Yeah, I totally agree about the defense, and the responsible advice is definitely to go with Burrow, but I don't think it's crazy to go with Howell. I think it's just like merely reckless, but
Yeah.
Sometimes reckless things work out. It's just the trade-off is sometimes they really don't.
Yeah, then it's just a wreck. But yeah, that's a tricky one. I think Burrow would still remain the play, and then just flip your defense from Baltimore to Miami. And then tying off this game, Matt wants to know if we have any concern over Justin Herbert rest of the season with everybody basically banged up on that team, and then plus the Brandon Staley factor.
It's an immense frustration, but part of the reason why Herbert was always such a stable fantasy pick, even despite the upside that he, at least before had, even if he doesn't have it now, the floor is so high just because the good part of the Staley factor, which is like they have no interest in running the ball at all. They are specifically disinterested in it, so they didn't build the team to be able to do it, so they can't do it. And even if they could, Staley would still probably be the kind of coach who wants 40 pass attempts every week. So I don't know who's got the lead in pass attempts, like Howell, maybe Howell and Herbert. They both got to be up there. Herbert is always liable to throw 40 passes in a game, which means even if he's only averaging 6 yards an attempt, he's around 240 yards, which, is probably like 8th highest in any given week at worst. So yeah, I think Herbert, it may be like he's better in fantasy than in real life, but at least he'll be useful in fantasy, I think.
I think so too. So
as long as he has Allen. If Allen's out, then never mind.
Good. That's a good caveat to mention, of course. Let's go Cardinals Texans. Kind of an awesome game. I mean, now that Kyler Murray's back and the Cardinals look like they had a pulse, like that, that's a credible side now once again. And then the Texans are, one of the best stories of the NFL season so far.
Yeah, and it didn't take long for Kyler Murray to show that this is not the Cliff Kingsbury offense anymore. Like he didn't look so static and like glitchy like he did under Cliff Kingsbury, even in his first game back too, doing almost like ill-advised running feats. I know he's had enough time to recover or whatever, but he was running crazy taxi style out there. Like it was not the kind of thing you see in a first game for somebody coming back from an ACL tear. Like you just don't really see a player move like that. So I also think it was really encouraging, not terribly shocking exactly, but encouraging that they got Rondale Moore going more. He played behind Michael Wilson, who I also like, but in that game against the Falcons, the Falcons are just crawling pace as an offense, and they don't score many points. So it makes sense that the Cardinals would use more 2 tight end sets because they're going to run more than they maybe would normally against the Texans, particularly, at least if Stroud has the kind of game that he's had most of the time this year. The Cardinals are probably going to have to go more 3 wide than they did against the Falcons. And Rondale Moore getting 8 targets on 35 snaps or whatever is kind of interesting. And it makes sense to me because it's like by going from Josh Dobbs to Kyler Murray, you're running so much more ambitious of a passing offense right there. And it makes sense that you would open up almost an entirely new route running position, more what was getting blocked out by, the Cardinals having Wilson and Brown ahead of him and then running the ball like 40 times a game. And now they're going to run it, maybe 30, something like that. So I'm interested to see if Rondale Moore can keep it going. I think he's basically had a lot of bad luck to this point. And it's like you were saying, it should be a good game because it's hard to find, a true weakness in either. I guess we'll see about the Houston running game, but Devin Singletary definitely looked a lot better last week than he or Pierce had previously. So if Houston can get a running game going too, then you can truly say it's hard to see how either offense fails in most games, let alone this one where, maybe one or both of these defenses will get somewhere soon, but they're not there yet. And, they're beat up in the case of the Texans. So while I worry about, Will Anderson, Greenard, eventually Stingley, under the direction of DeMeco Ryans, they'll be a sick defense, I have no doubt. I don't think it's this week. So hopefully, we can get another good game out of Kyler here.
So the over-under is 49. So it's
wow.
Not sneaking up on anybody, but would this be your game to kind of like center your DFS interests around this weekend?
Yeah. If only because it's kind of hard to find another game where both sides can punch back. It's a lot of the games that are close. It's generally like both offenses are bad, like Cleveland, Pittsburgh, or whatever. This is a game where it's close and both offenses appear capable, and I don't know if that's the case for any other matchup on the slate.
Yeah, it's should be fun. I'm very much looking forward to watching this one. Might even have to give it its own screen because I'm pumped. Let's go on over. We've got Titans, Jags. Titans 7-point dogs on the road against the Jaguars. The Jaguars, they come out of the bye. They're on a 5-game win streak, and then they just get smacked last week by the 49ers. That was a heinous performance, I thought, from the Jaguars, pretty much all around. Brutal game from Trevor Lawrence. And, that I speak as someone who's heavily invested in the Jags this season for fantasy purposes, and they're a bit of a tough watch right now.
Yeah, it's been the same thing every single week, and people forget about it for little bits at a time because like the Jaguars play a really bad team and they win easily. They beat the Falcons, they beat whatever, some other crap team, and so people sort of don't notice how horrible the offense was, and the narrative instead is like the Jags are getting hot or whatever. It's like, no, they're not. They suck. They're terrible. They are truly one of the 8 worst offenses in the league. If they didn't have Travis Etienne, they'd be one of the 4 or 5 worst offenses in the league. If they didn't have Trevor Lawrence, they'd be the worst offense in the NFL. And there's not nearly enough attention yet. I know it's picking up, but it's mostly just Jags fans. Like Sherwood Press Taylor is an all-time doofus of an offensive coordinator. Like you're not going to find one much worse than this guy in the rest of your life. It's incredible how bad he is. I don't know whether he has contraband on, I don't know if he has blackmail on Doug Peterson, or if maybe Doug Peterson, I don't know if it's Zach Taylor, Press Taylor's father. Is he a friend of Doug Peterson's or something? Is he his godfather? I don't know what reason there is for someone to get fired from the Eagles because he wanted Press Taylor as an offensive coordinator. Now doing the same thing with the Jaguars. And it's all just for reasons that I've been describing all year, John. It's the predictability. If it looks like the corners are knowing the routes that the receivers are running, it's because they do. And you never see a defender out of position when you're watching the Jags. You don't see it. No one is ever out of position. They are always there. Wherever the play is going, there's always someone there. This has not changed in any game this year. It's always been the same. It's just when they win, it's because of Travis Etienne doing Superman stuff or Trevor Lawrence doing Superman stuff. And then the narrative goes, oh, they did it. It's like, no, Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne did it. The offense is still dead, completely non-functioning. So, yeah, that 49ers game was not surprising to me. That was one of the most predictable outcomes, I thought, because like the 49ers were all in, like we knew they couldn't lose. And we also knew they had the means to win. The Jaguars in a way couldn't lose, but
they can't do anything. They're a non-competitive team. On defense, they're competitive. Caldwell, the defensive coordinator, is doing a great job and carrying the entire team, aside from, Etienne and Lawrence carrying the team. It's all Caldwell. And when the defense can't single-handedly win a game, the Jags just suck. They're terrible. And we know it's Press Taylor's fault, because last year they had Marvin Jones at receiver playing the position that Calvin Ridley is this year, and everything got worse. Even before Zay Jones got hurt. I remember, people saying, "Oh, Zay Jones makes the offense go." No, the offense is just dysfunctional, and the lesser players are getting usage because the offensive coordinator isn't good enough to get the ball to his best players. That is not an offense working. That's just Zay Jones looking better than Jamal Agnew, and that's seeming like the crux of the fulcrum on which it all swings. It's not. It's just not going to get better either until Press Taylor, and just about as likely Doug Peterson, is fired.
Very disappointing. I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans won that division.
Yeah, Jags aren't winning it. They suck.
They are.
I don't even trust them to beat the Titans, and the Titans suck. Mike Vrabel is a really good coach. The Jags don't have that on offense. They have a really good defensive coach, but even though I think Levis sucks, it's like, I don't think that the Jaguars offense is better than the Titans. It's not. It sucks. It's a crap offense.
Let's unpack that a little bit further. So obviously Levis has the crazy debut against the Falcons, has looked more probably like what we would have expected over the last, 2 weeks. What do we do with him here? This is, like you said, a pretty tough matchup on the road against a good defense.
I don't know. I would assume Levis is not like the most accurate passer, but I thought all along like his processing would be the biggest issue with him. And so given the prior, book written on him, I'm inclined to see his struggles as just defenses throwing new things at him and him not knowing what he's looking at. And that would be excusable for a rookie. There's going to be some games where you just get blindsided and your team's game plan just doesn't even get off the ground. And maybe that's all that happened last week. But because I'm a Levis pessimist, I can't really see him, while admitting that, he has time still to prove himself. I'm not inclined to assume he'll do that or anything close to it. So more likely than Levis like having a good game here, if it goes well for the Titans, I think it would have to look like they hide Levis, and as in like I think it's safe to say that if Derrick Henry doesn't get 20 carries in this game, the Titans aren't winning it. But particularly after a game like last week, I think if you're Vrabel and you're the Titans, you're no longer asking yourself the question like, how do we get Levis going, as much as you're kind of like, how do we move the ball without Levis playing like last week? And if they don't prioritize Henry more this week, I'll be a little surprised. There's probably not going to be any returns there. The Jags defense is really good, especially against the run, but their only way to winning, as far as they have reason to believe now, is Derrick Henry getting to 20 carries, even if it's a slog, even if it's like the whole time it's like a painful struggle to get him there. You need to get him there because from carries 18 onward, the defense you're playing, whoever it is, they're not as good as they were in the first quarter, and that's it's the only way. They have no second option.
No, they really don't. It's got to be a Derrick Henry game. Like you said, I'm kind of expecting a slog, but that's just what the Titans need to do, extend drives. And I don't really expect much from this Jags offense either this week. So over-under is 40.5. I think we're looking at an under in this one personally. Let's go on over to Raiders Dolphins. Dolphins at home, coming off the bye, 12.5 point favorites in this one against the Raiders, who have looked better since firing Josh McDaniels, of course, but no necessarily impressive wins over the last 2 weeks, just beating the Giants and the Jets, of course. Dolphins have kind of been a little bit like the AFC version of the Cowboys, where they can really crush the bad teams. Good teams give them a good bit more trouble, of course, and it's harder for them to get over the hump in those setups, but Raiders probably qualify as a bad team. I understand the spread in this one. I'm kind of leaning the Dolphins here, but what do you think?
Well, if the Raiders can cover, I think it's because Josh Jacobs kind of just took them there, and in doing so took enough time off the clock that the Dolphins couldn't just run the pass attempt volume too high. But the higher the pass attempt volume gets for the Dolphins, the more they win by. And if Josh Jacobs doesn't carry the Raiders offense, I think O'Connell's bad enough that you worry about him against pretty much any defense, but certainly including this one. So yeah, I would lean toward the Dolphins covering, but Jacobs is he's good and he's getting going a little bit, and the Dolphins' run defense is quite bad in my opinion. So yeah, I think they got a shot to cover, John.
Yeah, I'm not a Raiders hater for the record. In the comments, got a KG Wiley Raiders fan. I don't crap on them the way we do a lot of other teams, but playing the Dolphins in Miami, like, I'm sorry, like the Dolphins are just
the Raiders. Why would even Raiders fans know the Raiders suck? It's not. It's not a fun time anyone's having over there. It's just like the way Raiders fans should be looking at this is like, hey, we might have by miracle found our coach of the future, even though he was working under the guy who is the worst coach of all time that we for some reason hired. And
you're talking about Herm Edwards?
Is he on that team?
No, he was with Herm at Arizona State.
Antonio Pierce was?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. But yeah, Antonio Pierce seems pretty encouraging. So
definitely
that's Raiders fans should just be kind of like, hey, you know what? It looked like we were going to just be awful all year and not have anything to show for it. Where it's like, at least you're going to have a high pick and you maybe have a coach who can, you can really build something with. But Aiden O'Connell playing well in the meantime. Don't get greedy.
I do like the Jacobs call for this week. I think
Jacobs could have a really good game here. He could be like the running back one this week.
I can absolutely see that. The Dolphins definitely are soft against the run. And then I thought it was encouraging to see Michael Mayer catch a touchdown this past week. Your thoughts on him kind of going forward? I know we kind of talked a little bit off air over the course of the week about this tight end class. Obviously, Laporta and Kincaid are looking good, but Mayer overall, on paper coming into the season looked like he was the best of this bunch, and it's maybe starting to show a little bit.
Yeah, I was really high on Laporta. Like, I had Laporta ranked ahead of Kincaid, but even so, I had Mayer ranked tight end 1, and even before last week, even if Mayer hadn't had a good game last week, I'd still believe it right now, just because we can't evaluate them on the volume of their stats. It's pretty easy to observe, like, well, yeah, if Laporta and especially if Kincaid were playing for the Raiders, they wouldn't have done anything either, especially if they were making them split snaps with Austin Hooper and for like 4 of the first 6 weeks block more than they ran routes for some reason. Michael Mayer is really, really good in my opinion. I think he, I don't know, you're not expecting like he's not an athlete on the level of like a Travis Kelce or Kyle Pitts or whatever, but he is basically a better, to me anyway, Michael Mayer is quite simply a better Zach Ertz. Peak Zach Ertz, make him better. That's Michael Mayer.
That's pretty good. You'll take that. So I'm encouraged by him going forward. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think this will be a bad watch. I would much less rather watch Titans Jags than this one. I think this could be reasonably fun on the early window on Sunday. Last game of said early window, we got the Giants going to DC to face the Commanders. This line has come down a little bit, if memory serves, over the course of the week. Like, this was Commanders -10 as of a few days ago. Now it's down to 8.5 or 9, depending on which book you're looking at. So
are they benching Tommy DeVito? What happened?
I'm trying to see why. I think maybe it's just the visceral seeing a -10 next to Washington. You're like, that simply can't be.
Yeah, someone just said that's an error. Understandable enough. Yeah. I would still take Washington to cover just because, I mean, John, Tommy DeVito, we've already established like Eric Dungy would have been a way better player, and like Ryan Nassib was a way better Syracuse quarterback,
Oh, wow.
He never was able to play in the NFL. So I don't know. It's as simple for me as like the guy who he did get benched at Syracuse, didn't he? Tommy DeVito had to transfer to Illinois because he got benched.
That's right. Yeah, for a
if you
guy
get benched
who
at Syracuse, it's unless it's like a Joe Flacco case where some
Curtis Painter, Dave Wanstead.
Well, that was Pittsburgh. Yeah, I can't remember who Pittsburgh's quarterbacks were. It's like unless there's
It was
at least
Painter.
It was. I thought he was at Purdue.
Oh shoot, my bad.
Anyway, we know we remember too many guys. It's a liability. I think it's safe to say though, like if you're a quarterback at Syracuse and you get benched, you're not an NFL quarterback. You're not a CFL quarterback. Like you're maybe Arena League, something like that. So DeVito really is that bad, and it's kind of a shame. It's not his fault. He didn't deserve to become a meme like this. But there's only one explanation possible, and it's that the Giants are tanking knowingly, and they want to leave nothing to chance. And you know what? This is the guy for the job. It really is.
It's a no-show job from the Giants at this point. It's a tough watch. I think Washington, they would just basically have to get in their own way at this point, and to the extent that the Giants defense was starting to kind of look like it was turning a corner in October. Now you get the quarterback issues to the point where you don't have an offense anymore, and so you're just constantly on the field. If you're the Giants' defense, like good luck. Like in Washington's offense is aggressive as hell. Like they're going to go crazy basically unless Howell throws a bunch of interceptions.
Yeah, and Howell, I guess, could have a meltdown game or something, but short of that, I don't understand how how the Giants cover, let alone win the game. I feel like if Howell gets sacked 12 times, I still take Washington to win.
Yeah, honestly, it's that brutal. What do you do with Saquon Barkley at this point?
Start him.
Yeah, you gotta start him still. But
I mean, when people are starting Rico Dowdle in these streets, there cannot be a Saquon Barkley on a bench anywhere. Maybe 8-team leagues or something. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So you're expecting a lot of carries. Great. Not a lot of yards at this point. Like he pretty much has to be Superman to do anything from scrimmage at this point. It's
40 carries for 80 yards. Running back 12.
Sign me up. All right, let's get on over to the afternoon window. We've got the Bucs going out to San Francisco to play the 49ers. 49ers, another huge spread here. 11.5-point favorites. That seems to suggest that the odds makers believe that the 49ers of last week and the first 5 weeks of the season are more indicative of who they are than that ugly 3-game losing skid that they went on after starting the season so red hot. They looked great last week, no denying that. I think the Jaguars definitely played a hand in that in their own right, but I do think that the 49ers are quite good. I give the Bucs a little bit more respect than 12 points, though, even though this being on the road.
That is a lot of points. However, I agree. Like, even though I was describing Jacksonville in all these negative ways, it definitely a part of it was that the 49ers just were really good in that game. It was pretender versus contender textbook case, simple as that. So the 49ers also, it's like so much of their struggles, their losing streak coincided with one particular injury, Trent Williams. And Trent Williams being back is huge. And even in this game, he wasn't healthy against the Jaguars. He was probably like 75% at best or something like that. If he's getting better, the whole offense is just going to, it's not even going to be like an incremental thing. It's just going to be like one day Trent Williams is healthy and just Christian McCaffrey seems to have wide open running lanes again. And it won't be so obvious why. It won't be like Trent Williams just took out 4 guys, but just everything will just start working a lot better. And this might be a game for that. I can't figure out what I think of the Tampa Bay defense. Like, I feel like they've got quite a bit of talent and they've got some good games this year, but then they got some other games where Todd Bowles just seems to get completely just rocked in the game plan. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it's one of those things like the game is just kind of passing him by and he'll still have his like moments of lucidity where he looks like It's like, hey, that's like Todd Bowles, 10 years ago. He's on it again. He's got it all figured out. But then you'll have a game like Houston's, and it's like this can't happen if you're also a decent coach. Like you've lost too much to fit into that category anymore. So I definitely expect the Buccaneers to get out coached on defense. I can't tell how bad it might get out of hand, and I don't know how much we need to assume they get 75 cents of production for every dollar of talent, and I do think something like that is happening now. So I definitely expect the 49ers to roll, but I don't know if someone like Carlton Davis is healthy, maybe that makes Deebo Samuel less viable. Maybe it narrows the margins just enough to get it to more like a 10-point win than a 13-point win. I don't really know, but one thing I'll say is I'm not optimistic for the Buccaneers offense at all, even though the 49ers have been shown for lacking cornerback depth. I think you need to have at least three credible route runners, including at least one credible downfield route runner, or you need two and a running quarterback. And Baker Mayfield doesn't quite fit that category to me. So what you should be able to do if you're the 49ers is put Javarius Ward with a little safety help on Evans. That's a wrap. You put double team on Godwin every play. You maybe give up some chain moving. You don't get the shutout, but you never let them get within striking range of your point total if you run the defense that way here.
No, exactly. And then looking at a couple fantasy items, we got a question in the chat from Master. Full point PPR league, do you prefer Deebo or DeAndre Swift rest of season? Because there's potential trade here in this league.
I lean Deebo, but I can't tell if I'm drawing on anything other than just like my preseason rankings in my head. I don't think you have to prefer either side, really. I lean Deebo, acknowledging that Swift can be a running back one when he's at his absolute best. I have no faith in the Eagles personnel management at running back. I don't see any predictable rhyme or reason there other than like we love Kenny. So if that's the plan, I just kind of lean Deebo on that basis if I need to.
That's definitely understandable. I think my frustration with the Niners in fantasy outside of McCaffrey is that it feels like it's never everyone going off at once. It's like it's Brandon Ayuk week, it's George Kittle week, and then it's Deebo Samuel. So like the week to week consistency is what scares me off of Deebo a little bit in this particular toss up. So I still lean Swift. I'm not super strong. I totally acknowledge I could be wrong, but I just feel like Swift at least has the week to week floor for the most part, and maybe the Eagles will come to their senses coming out of the bye when it comes to that Kenny.
I didn't realize usage. They're giving him so much usage actually too. It's like he's just not doing a whole lot. So that's interesting. He could get better maybe, but you're right. Deebo, there will never be a 49ers offense with Brock Purdy where all three of the pillars are rolling at the same time. It's like it's always two at most, and oftentimes it's a deliberate Shanahan thing to play off of one thread as a decoy given game plan.
Right, exactly. So there's that, and then rounding it out on the Buccaneers side here, Rachaad White's seen 20 carries each of the last 2 weeks. I think you don't expect him to have a great rushing day in this one, but you at least hope when you're analyzing Rachaad White that he can do something in the pass game. But I worry about the athleticism of those 49ers linebackers kind of neutralizing what he can do as a pass catcher. Like last week, he obviously kind of saved himself with that long touchdown reception. I don't really see that here. I think you still start him, but you're not expecting like a spike week from him.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. But while I was just talking about how I think Ward, a safety, shuts down Evans, and then safety help on Godwin contains them. Rachaad White dealing with Fred Warner at all. That's about as bad as it can get. So yeah, I feel like the 49ers have just extreme strength at the few parts of the field that the Buccaneers are entirely dependent of their offensive usage. So it just seems like the 49ers are one of the worst matchups possible for this offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. So the Bucs defense is going to need to keep them in this game. And to your point, Todd Bowles might not necessarily be up to that challenge against Shanahan and whatever he's cooking up. All right, I'm looking forward to this one. We got Bills Jets. I think people, we've been standing on this island for a little while. I think you even longer than I have, but I was very pessimistic of the Bills coming into this season. I had
more than me. I mean, I can't believe, you'll get to it. Sorry.
Yes, I certainly will. But I took the under on their 10.5 win total. I didn't know it would look like this though. I thought I'd be really sweating that out. But I mean, you look at the standings in the AFC right now. They're behind, or they're only ahead of the Raiders because of a head-to-head win. Like they need the tiebreaker over the Raiders. They've had some tough losses within the conference, and they have an absolute gauntlet of a schedule going forward. I mean, defensively, I mean, we saw what happened against the Jets in week 1. Weird game. I'm not going to hold that against them too much, although Josh Allen did have tons of turnovers in that game, and turnovers continue to be an issue for him. Although always important to note, if you ever listen to the broadcast, it's simply because he is too competitive. It's never anything else. Never truly Josh Allen's fault, other than just wanting to win so badly. But going forward, you've got the Eagles on the other side of this game. You got the bye. Then you got at Kansas City, Dallas, at the Chargers. There's really only one guaranteed win here on the rest of the schedule, and it's that one they need that one. But
sorry, I had to say that.
You did. Home against the Patriots, although they did lose to the Patriots earlier, so maybe that even is.
I literally believe that the Chargers are an easier win for them.
Yeah, I mean, division stuff, crazy stuff happens, but you see what happens on Monday night, and I liked the Broncos to cover because it felt like you give them a little bit more than a touchdown. That they were coming off the bye. Felt like the Broncos were starting to maybe find some modicum of a pulse after a really rough start to the season. They beat the Chiefs going into the bye, so I was like, I could see the Broncos like hanging around. I didn't expect them to win that one outright the way they did, and it seems like things are crumbling in a hurry. You have the brutal end of game sequence where you send everyone on the blitz. The Broncos pick up some chunk yardage, get themselves into field goal range. Then they're hustling onto the field. They miss that rushed field goal attempt, but hey, there's 12 guys on the field, so therefore you have to fire your offensive coordinator about that one.
Right. That's what really gives away the whole thing and makes it all stink so bad. Is even as someone who is a Ken Dorsey critic, and I definitely was, I thought he was no Dable. I didn't think he was figuring things out quite as fast as I wanted. I specifically hated the whole 2 tight end theory of the offense. I hated the way they used Deontay Hardy. I hate Trent Sherfield playing snaps over Khalil Shakir and Deontay Hardy. There's all these things that I see them wearing away at a margin that they couldn't afford to, and that always bothered me. However, Ken Dorsey is, like you were getting at, he's not like the single reason they lost that game, and you could tell it was just a kind of rotten I don't know what the right word is. It's not done in a sincere effort to improve the team. It was done as like a sacrifice, it was like scapegoating, of course, but it was more specifically like Sean McDermott just deciding like, we're going to fire him just because somebody needs to pay, and it's not going to be me.
Right.
And it's not quite as rotten seeming to me as when Frank Reich fired Marcus Brady with the Colts, but it does feel like that. The only difference is I think Jim Irsay gave Frank Reich a very specific ultimatum, like, you fire somebody or I'm going to fire you. And so Reich was like, what if we fire my offensive coordinator? Will that work? And Irsay said, fine. And then 4 days later, Irsay fired Reich too. In this case, I think it was more like Sean McDermott was firing Dorsey because he wanted to do something before he had that conversation, be it with Bean or what's his name, Pagula, whoever it would have been in the analogy for McDermott. So, McDermott fired Ken Dorsey knowing perfectly well that it was not going to fix a problem. He did it because he thought it would buy him time. And that's just rotten, and the players must know it. the players seemed to really like Ken Dorsey, actually. We're like 3 weeks removed from there being press about how Ken Dorsey is seen as like this bright light in the Buffalo Bills organization and like a genius who's just inevitable, who's going to have his time, you know, as a leading coaching figure in the NFL. And then this happens, and like you said, John, it was following a defensive meltdown, a game management meltdown from the special teams and the head coach. So not going to fix whatever problems they were having. And just about as importantly, maybe more importantly, whatever they do without Dorsey isn't going to address any of the things that he needed to improve on. They're going to try to do the same offense, just with a different play caller, who I guess will get fired if they miss another, or if they lose on a field goal again, or that they almost won on initially before the 12 men penalty. It's crazy. And again, I am not a Dorsey fan, but it stinks. And I think Sean McDermott basically like besmirched himself and is filthied and is karmically hellbound now.
Yeah, it felt like there was almost like an activation button clicked on everyone's brain on Monday night. If you're looking at Twitter, where I'd never really heard any rumblings of McDermott potentially being on any sort of hot seat, even with how the season was going. Now it feels like his seat is scorching. Like he might be in more danger than Ron Rivera. Maybe that's a stretch.
Don't say that, John. Don't say things like that. No, you're right though. It's I don't know if it's irony exactly, but a funny thing about this decision of McDermott's to fire Dorsey now is that it's kind of like going, you know, all in and getting called on it, and now you really need to deliver now, because and not just like, oh, we eked a wild card spot. It's like you need to conclusively demonstrate that Dorsey was the problem and that you had an idea of how to fix the problem, and that you needed to get rid of Dorsey for that fix to occur. And if they don't improve on offense, if they keep having the same struggles, the question, I guess, at that point is, it's like, does McDermott make it through the whole year, or does the alienation build toward him specifically, especially after firing a guy who, by all accounts, was well liked in the organization? Sometimes players just say, like, we're not cool with this, you know, and McDermott's, I think, on watch for that kind of thing, because he basically is behaving like a scoundrel, and there's no way anyone can find him to be a good leader right now.
No, so that they are, all of this to say is the Bills are a bit of a mess right now, and it's tough. It's hard to analyze this team going forward if they're like in the midst of this kind of meltdown. Now
they need a scheme change. They need to change their whole offensive approach, and it's like you can't do that in season by firing Ken Dorsey. You know, you're going to run the same system worse.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen here. And when you're going up against the Jets defense, like that's a pretty like scary realization here. So the over under here is set at 40. The Bills are favored by 7, pretty much consensus line there. Can we trust them? Can we trust them to cover 7 against the Jets team that simply cannot score touchdowns?
The Jets are so bad they literally cannot beat the Raiders. That would be a pretty horrible, fall from grace for the Bills to lose this one again. But that Jets defense is gnarly, and if you're going to turn the ball over a lot, as Josh Allen, you need to score touchdowns a lot, or you in a way do become worse than Zach Wilson as far as this one matchup goes, because Zach Wilson is not creating, he's not given the chance, but he's also not creating as many turnovers, so it's like if you're Allen and you're turning the ball over and not offsetting it with touchdowns, all you're really doing in effect is just giving the other team a shorter field to go than you need to yourself. And if you're talking about who the better player is, obviously Josh Allen's so much better that it's like one of those things, like the Jets have to win by not using their quarterback. Like it's the only way they can do it. But it's not necessarily better to get bad high volume out of a quarterback than no volume of anything.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think the Jets hang in here once again with the Bills. And yeah, I think this is a close game. I think the Bills win, but I don't think that fixes.
Yeah.
their
The one
season.
thing I'm not that I'm brave enough to predict that they lose, but I want to say this is going to be sooner the opposite of the Antonio Pierce thing.
Yes, I was just thinking
this
that.
is like if the idiot head coach fired the Antonio Pierce analog. So the Bills, McDermott, he needs to get things going fast, or he might have a real mutiny on his hands.
Exactly. Matt brings up the point, and I've definitely seen this get tossed around that the Josh Allen defenders are really reaching for anything they can find to positively spin this, where the metrics say that none of the turnovers are Josh Allen's fault, as far as expected turnover worthy plays, I believe is the metric. Josh Allen's always been mistake prone, though. I mean,
yeah, I'm in such a weird position on this because I used to be against the peak of Josh Allen hype. I'd be pushing back saying no, he's not this good, and here are the reasons why, and people are just like, you're an idiot, we're just posting pictures of my address at me, and then it's all of a sudden now it's it hasn't even been 2 years and people are just kind of like, oh, also Josh Allen sucks. And I think it's just it's like the whiplash, the concussive whiplash that people feel from going from Josh Allen's is good or better than Mahomes to just being told by reality so flatly, that was a stupid thing for you to say. It's when we get embarrassed by reality, by reality like that, it's it's not in our nature to blame ourselves. It's in our nature to say oh, Josh Allen must be an idiot to the degree that I feel silly about my prediction of him being as good or better than Patrick Mahomes. It's the lack of perspective at each turn in the process is what stands out to me. It's he was never as good as they were saying 2 years ago. He thus, as quarterback 3 to 5 or whatever he is not actually underperforming now. It's this is a permissible level of play for quarterback 3 through 5 in a down year. Even the best players have down years sometimes. It's just, it doesn't change the overall story with him. And yet it's I don't know. At the same time, of course, I don't want to defend all those stupid advanced metrics. They're not advanced, especially EPA. Messy stat to try to apply to players. It's at most a team stat. And when you try to conflate it to a single player, you're basically just saying you don't understand how football works. You think it's like batter versus pitcher or something rather than an 11-part team function. So that stuff's crap too. But I do think there is something to the point that turnovers don't matter that much as long as there's tons of touchdowns also. But the problem right now, and especially against the Broncos, it's you got the turnovers, but without the touchdowns. And so I will say for me, it's Josh Allen is kind of on notice. It's after you've played like this, you need to get some touchdowns coming. It's just also, I think it's only fair to give him the chance to do that also,
No, exactly. Let's move forward. In that case, we just wrote the Bills' obituary, perhaps for the 2023 season. Let's go out to LA. We got the Rams. We got the Seahawks. The Seahawks only half-point favorite. So this game essentially a pick 'em. So that seems to suggest that Stafford should be back in action here. The Seahawks.
I hope so, man.
So what's up with the Seahawks right now? I mean, do we just give credit to who they've played the last couple of weeks, or I don't know,
man.
This a team that overperformed last year? Yeah, no, I don't
weird. Either. I do think they're one of those cases where they have too much of a sum of talent to just stay down. It's if they're struggling, I think a team as talented as theirs will eventually turn the story toward an arc of improvement. They'll get hot late in the year. Maybe they'll be one of those teams where people are yeah, they were struggling early, but they got going at the right time. If I had to pick a team for that kind of trajectory, the Seahawks would be on the short list, both because they are that low right now, but also because it's we know that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett can combine for 2,700 receiving yards in a year, no problem. We know that these running backs can do X, Y, Z. We know Though their defense has gotten mixed results, we know that there are several good players scattered throughout. There's certain production trends that are clearly good that they have. So I think one thing, I guess, if I had to pin one specific thing that the Seahawks have had worse results with this year, it's the pass blocking because of offensive line injuries. And I guess the right tackle is just kind of out. I can't remember how long, but Charles Cross getting healthier, ideally getting Damian Lewis, the guard, on the field all the time. He's been in and out of the lineup. That might make Geno Smith more consistent when he's able to get to like a 5-7 step drop without getting clobbered. That kind of stuff, if it settles into place, I think could set up the Seahawks for a bit of a rally in the second half of the year. However, the Rams are a tough matchup for them. I mean, it just, McVay had their defense really figured out the last time they played. And if the Rams have Stafford, it could just be simple as just game on for Kupp and Nakua both. Like you might get 1,800-yard Cooper Kupp just like pushing a button the second Stafford gets back on the field. So that would be difficult for the Seahawks to weather.
I'm just glad that we don't actually have to see Carson Wentz. I was honestly okay seeing Brett Rippon even in one horrible game. I'd take that over watching Carson Wentz at this point. Carson Wentz just makes me upset. But yeah, Stafford fully practiced on Wednesday, so it looks like he'll be good to go, back in action there. So yeah, I do think that this is a good setup for those pass catchers. That they didn't have Kupp in the first game, of course, and the Rams are coming off the bye also. So I mean, there's some positive tailwinds in the Rams' favor here. I was initially surprised to see the line be what it is, but now that we're kind of talking it out a little bit more, I can definitely see it. What is your latest take on this Seattle backfield? Is Zach Charbonnet starting to arrive a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know if we're really going to get any closure with this backfield. I think it's going to just remain in a flux. The question of whether Charbonnet takes more carries specifically might just be a question of do the Seahawks get leads in any games? And the tone lately has been close games where they need to throw the ball a lot. And so Ken Walker gets what he does, of course. And instead of there being carries 20 through 30 to give out, it's like they just stop at 20 and then Charbonnet pass blocks 50 times. So that is good for Charbonnet that he's getting on the field in situations like that, but it's kind of a maxed out situation as long as the rushing tally stays the same and as long as Walker stays active. So this isn't really the game that I would imagine it happening, but if there is a game where the Seahawks kind of get a first quarter lead and never give it up, maybe then you see the vision of the offense where it's like Walker gets 16, Charbonnet gets 12. But until then, it seems like they're just kind of playing catch up, and Charbonnet is just their main blitz guy. Yeah,
so that's kind of a frustrating development where it's like, oh, great, he's getting on the field, and oh, he's just not getting the ball. I'll pull this up here momentarily, but we do have metrics on our player pages that measure your touches per snap, and it's not looking great. Let's see, snaps with a touch 27% of the time. So basically 1 out of every 4 times that he's on the field, he is getting the ball. That is 5th percentile among running backs. So maybe that corrects, but I don't know. I mean, if they feel like it's working, then why would it change, I guess, necessarily?
It's kind of just the circumstances. It's not that rate would hold in other circumstances. It's just that they've had the same type of circumstance, which is to say them trying to throw the ball downfield to catch up or score quickly for whatever reason, and in that situation, you're not designing screens to Charbonnet. You're not handing the ball off to Charbonnet. You're just saying we need to get past the chains here, and we need you to pick up the blitz so that Geno can get to his 5th step in the drop. And that's just kind of where they are structurally. So if Geno doesn't need to take a 5-step drop, if they're, not, if they have a lead instead of playing for behind or tied or whatever, that Charbonnet touch per snap variable will change. Moreover, it can't get any lower than it currently is, really.
True. Okay. Let's get on over to Our next game, we're on to the primetime games. This one kind of sticks out among the other two primetime games, maybe clearly the third best one, but even still, the way that each of these teams have played of late makes this one pretty interesting. I think if you looked at this game in September, you'd say, oh my God, disgusting. Like this needs to be flexed, or there should never be, like they shouldn't even say that they do flex games, because this would be disgusting. But Vikings, Broncos 2.5-point favorites in this one. First of all, I would like you to make some sense of what Minnesota did last week to the Saints.
Well, some amount of credit to the Vikings, Dobbs and O'Connell both, but that's just embarrassing for the Saints. And it would also look a little different to me if the Saints had been vaguely functional on offense. It's just, the Saints are a complete joke. And in that game, the players knew it too. You could feel the disgust of the Saints players toward themselves even. And it's not the outcome you usually get from the Saints, and I don't know how much you can make projections based off of it for the Minnesota offense. Specifically, it seemed to me that there was a lot of this like bootleg play action kind of stuff they were doing with Dobbs, and it seemed like the Saints were really struggling to handle that, especially after like 3 seconds in a play. They'd start doing broken play movement, and it's like the Saints had never done a broken pass play defensive drill in their lives. It's like they couldn't track the improvised routes at all. So it worked for the Vikings, and credit to them for executing it as far as they did. But to me, it doesn't seem like a sustainable offense, both that you need to get a more varied sort of passing setup, and you got to make more plays in structure. You can't turn everything into just, NFL blitz scrambling drill kind of thing. Like you got to throw a slant on time occasionally. And I still don't have faith that Dobbs can do that. I mean, granted, he's got much better receivers to work with in Minnesota than he did with Arizona, but it wasn't truly bad pass catchers in Arizona, Zach Ertz aside, I guess. And he was about 61% completed at like 5.8 yards per pass. Like that's not serious. That's a backup. That's like Tyler Huntley numbers, and it's fine for a backup. And especially when you throw in the rushing production, you're getting somewhere. But the idea that like Dobbs as a passing quarterback has arrived and is a proven commodity, that's crazy to me. And I think you see it as like an assumption now. Like people are all just like, why didn't every team trade for Josh Dobbs? It's because Josh Dobbs is a backup quarterback, and he's going to be a backup quarterback his whole career. So that like meme aspect of the whole thing is getting way out of hand, I think. And I don't know. I don't want to say the Broncos are well coached, but I guess I'd be surprised if they came out quite as flat as the Saints did, And one thing that's important to remember too with that Saints-Vikings matchup, the Vikings defense is bad, and the Saints should have been rolling on offense. They just didn't because they're incredibly mismanaged. So putting Dobbs in a catch-up script is a different variable entirely too. If the Broncos, who have played clean offense pretty much all year, it's been impotent at times, but it's been clean. Like Russell Wilson on pace for like 32 passing touchdowns and 8 interceptions or something like that. It speaks for itself. Don't ask me how they're going to get the yardage all the time, but those touchdown to interception numbers speak for themselves. And against this Vikings defense, I don't know why Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy would struggle. I don't know why what has been a much improved season for Russell Wilson, I don't know why it would start to go off the rails here against this defense of all defenses. So I would lean the Broncos, but don't get me wrong, it's not like I expected Dobbs to do as well as he did last week either.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that after the Falcons game, like I thought that was an amazing instance. I thought that was one of the cooler performances and stories of the entire season. But I thought the Saints were going to go in there and make Dobbs look like what we've known Dobbs to look like, and he didn't. And I still, yes, I'm with you. I don't believe that this is some sort of sea change, some sort of turned corner for Dobbs.
We had that Titans game too, It's like Dobbs has had chances. This idea that this is like, oh, he was just this diamond in the rough who never got a shot. Like, it's not true.
No, that's not
true.
He
still sucked with the Cardinals. He was just better than we thought. He was better than Clayton Tune. It was like great.
Let's not double count this, right? So
good for fantasy though, as long as he keeps running and he keeps throwing the ball at Addison and eventually Jefferson.
So if Jefferson comes back this week, which we still don't know, I think we'll have obviously some more clarity on that as of tomorrow. But if he's back, feel comfortable starting him right out of the gate, and then also with Jordan Addison, do you worry about him maybe seeing his role reduced a little bit?
I do think Jefferson coming back would pretty much put Addison into like a 5 target per game kind of role at most. It would be, KJ Osborne also is already toast. Justin Jefferson, I think, has he's proven he's too good of a player to be doubted anytime he is active. So if he's active, you have to start him, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. But yes, it's important to note that when it comes to Addison. And then anything else on the Broncos side of the ledger as far as our fantasy discussion is concerned? You said a pretty nice looking setup for guys like Jeudy and Sutton.
I think so. Trying to remember. I guess the way you hurt the Vikings, as far as I see it, is you get a little bit downfield on them. Like Byron Murphy runs like a 4.55 at 185 pounds or something like that. Like that guy cannot defend 10 plus yards downfield. He's really good underneath. He's comfortable underneath. So don't play there. Like go downfield, make him turn and run, make a Caleb Evans turn and run. And I feel like the Broncos have done a good enough job of setting up Russell Wilson for that situation that if they set it up here, there's reason to believe he'll land some strikes. I feel like Jeudy is due for a big game, and I like Sutton. Sutton getting a bit of a renaissance season is cool, but Jeudy on a per snap basis has been rather productive. It's just like his snap count has slightly lagged Sutton lately, and the Broncos haven't thrown the ball much. They don't throw the ball 30 times in a game. So right. With that said, Jeudy is still getting open, and these corners just can't cover a guy like him.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And then, this wasn't the greatest week for waiver wire options. I think I have an idea of what your answer might be, but with Ty Chandler, assuming that Madison is out or limited, which, he did not practice on Wednesday, you think Chandler's like a spot start type of guy?
Yeah, if he's getting the work, obviously usage at running back is currency in itself. I will say he is really bad, and it's so funny to me that in that game, people started saying like, "Oh man, he looks so much better than Madison." He ran like 3 sweeps. They ran a couple sweeps with him, probably off of like a fake bootleg kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, he ran to a corner. He can run in a straight line to a corner. Even I have conceded that much all this time. He's somewhat fast and certainly a lot faster than Madison. So if the task is running a straight line to point B and the point B is off on the corner here, that's what Madison can do. Where he starts to stumble, which is to say every other carry but those 3 or 4 in that game, is when you're going between the tackles at all, when it's not bounced outside, when there is something of a processing moment, when you have to process with your mind and keep your feet moving in concert with your mind and your reads. All in that setting, Ty Chandler becomes a slow player. Like he has to spend so much time processing that he becomes a buffering sort of thing. And he runs like with determination and he runs hard, but he runs blindfolded. And I can't remember what exactly his figure was at in this game, but I could have sworn, John, that he went something like 10 carries and must have gotten about 5 yards on them in this game, because I thought he had something like 40 yards on 5 carries at one point, and he finished with 45 on 15. Like his yardage just stopped in the second quarter, even though the carry count got to 15 starting from 3 or 5 or something like that. So I don't know. I mean, the Broncos' run defense has to be a little easier to move on than the Saints, but Ty Chandler needs open space. He needs the C to part, and if the C parts, he's fast enough to run through it. But that just makes him the same as like 95% of NFL running backs. It's like fast or not, it doesn't show up.
No, I'm with you there. So I think in the short term, people are desperate at this point.
Good flex play. Like I'd play him
Yeah.
over, the Dowdle types I'd probably play him over even like Keaton Mitchell or something like that, just because Madison could get 15 carries.
Right. Let's go over to the main event.
Chandler. Sorry, Chandler.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go Monday Night Football. We got the Chiefs playing host to the Eagles. Both these teams coming off the bye. Two of the top three teams as far as Super Bowl odds are concerned. No surprise there. Again, obviously a rematch of last year's Super Bowl. I'm very excited. I think everyone's very excited. This is probably the regular season game of the year. Can't wait. But, how do we see this one unfolding now that both these teams are going to have an extra week to prepare? We got the Chiefs as 2.5-point favorites in this one, and the over-under just 45. So a lot of respect to the defenses on both sides here coming from the odds makers.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot more respect for the Chiefs defense than most people do, although I guess maybe there's some more awareness as time goes on that the Chiefs defense is no joke. The Chiefs defense, I don't know, it might be something like a top 8 kind of defense. The Eagles have been disappointing, if anything, on defense, and I can't tell how much of that is just due to the injuries at corner, especially Avonte Maddox. Don't know if the Kevin Byard trade will maybe turn the tide the other way. Very well could. I certainly, I don't want to bet against any defense that has front 4 personnel like the Eagles have. So I certainly respect them, but it must be noted their pass defense has not been very effective this year. And I wonder, like, what about the Chiefs would make that turn for the better? It's hard for me to, while acknowledging there's a chance that Patrick Mahomes kind of just doesn't do that well in this game. It's like, why would the defense that's given up so much passing production this year all of a sudden look good against the Chiefs? And I can't convince myself that it makes any sense. So I wonder, what does Steve Spagnuolo have cooked up for the Eagles offense? And Spagnuolo, he's kind of a weird coach because he's not exactly like one of the most feared defensive coordinators, but he's just he's seen a lot. And he has at times been quite creative relative to the rest of the league. It's like maybe Steve Spagnuolo doesn't have an annually elite defense, but it's like he's come up with some of the more memorable just tricks as a defensive coordinator over the past 20 years. And I think it would not be shocking if he had a really good sense of how to challenge the Eagles offense, or at least better than most teams. And as far as what that results in, I'm thinking something like pretty much everybody other than AJ Brown might struggle. And I say everybody other than AJ Brown because AJ Brown's just not subject to natural law, and he can just transcend any single circumstance. So the question though is, it's like if Devontae Smith has had a kind of down year, and he has, and if his down games have kind of coincided with these moments of slight struggle for the Eagles, like struggle that didn't happen last year for Smith or the Eagles, then like, do I expect this to be the setting of all settings where Smith breaks through? And at once I do consider Smith's resurgence inevitable. Like I absolutely think he's the real deal. I don't think that his struggles are the kind of thing that are going to last. But I would have felt more comfortable projecting that against a lesser opponent than this. So I'm leaning Chiefs, but it does turn into one of those things. If Devontae Smith has a good game here, it becomes one of those things where that alone makes me concerned for the Chiefs, because they don't have so much obvious firepower themselves. I'm just kind of deferring to the general Mahomes factor.
So with Devontae Smith specifically, last season, we had sort of a parallel circumstance, right, where Dallas Goedert gets hurt. Devontae Smith started going off and basically established himself as someone that people were comfortable taking early third, late second in fantasy drafts this year. Do we see that type of usage uptick with Goedert being sidelined with that injury?
Yeah, I should have phrased it differently. Smith will have a better game than he's had in a while, I think. Like without Goddard, that necessitates the usage for Smith. It's like either AJ Brown goes for 240 yards, which I guess could happen, or Smith goes over like 110 or 100 or something like that. And because otherwise, how are you getting Jalen Hurts to so much as like 220 yards passing? Like he needs to get well past that, and if he does, Smith has to be pushing like 80 or 90 at least, I feel like. So should be a good game for Smith, but I guess we'll find out. Like without Goddard, is Brown and Smith enough, or is Hurts might Hurts kind of struggle to throw the ball because he doesn't have the usual like firepower advantage that he has like any other games. Like when you have AJ Brown, Goddard, and Smith on the field, it's kind of hard to be a bad quarterback, you know? And this game, not that I'm trying to predict a bad one for Hurts, but you could look at it as if this is a good game for Hurts, it would be more impressive than, you know, the usual good game that he has. It would mean a little bit more.
No, definitely. I mean, this is obviously a huge spot for them. Is there anything in this tight end room behind Goddard that interests you one way or the other? It seems like Jack Stoll is sort of the de facto.
He's just a blocker. I think it's got to be Calcaterra who gets the next rep, or I think Albert Okwuegbunam can play, but I don't know why they even wanted him. Albert Okwuegbunam is the tight end version of Rashad Penny. Like they're both very they're very, very like easygoing guys who don't do the rah-rah crap, and like people hold it against them. Like, he doesn't look like he's trying that hard. I was like, well, it's fine. He's really talented. If you must understand it this way, then it's okay if he's not trying that hard, because he's running a 4.49 at 258 pounds, and it's just probably is easier to him than it is for Jack Stoll. You know, it's like Jack Stoll goes chug, 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 chug when he runs, and that's better than Albert Okwuegbunam, who just goes whoop. You know, like that's not as football-y to me. That's not as gnarly and cool to me. Like, just get the big fast guy on the field is what I believe. Give the big fast guy the ball and tell him to run with it is what I believe. The Eagles they're kind of, I think, huffing their own farts at this point with like their whole thing about like, we have a culture, we do it a certain way here. Like if your culture is Jack Stoll over Albert Okwuegbunam, your culture is losing to teams like the Chiefs. So whatever it means to you, I don't care.
Well said. I do expect the Chiefs to win this one and cover. I just hope that it lives up to the hype. I have no reason to believe that it won't, especially with both teams coming in well rested. Hopefully Jalen Hurts, obviously he looked a little bit gimpy during that Cowboys game. So hopefully the last 2 weeks have been able to get him back closer to 100%. But I think we're potentially looking at a classic here. If memory serves, the Monday night game before Thanksgiving 5 years ago was like the greatest Monday night football game ever. The Rams Chiefs game. I don't know if it's going to be the same level of shootout necessarily, but in terms of just general intrigue and high quality football play, I think we could see it.
Yeah, I would trade this game for as a trade-off. I mean, 4 more Raiders Steelers Sunday night footballs. I think it could be worth that much.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Honestly, this is gonna be sick. Cannot wait. But that's gonna wrap it up for us here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, presented by our friends over at Circa and over at Splash Sports, and thanks to our podcast hosting network, Blue Wire, for all the good stuff they do for us. Sorry to the audio listeners that for our executive co-producer Bentley making his presence known a handful of times during the pod, but oh well. Just sometimes you just have a dog.
You have to keep the pod studio safe, and sometimes it was like the Drifters from the other time. Like he's got to scare them off. It's just part of the deal.
No, exactly. He's the best guard dog anyone could ask for. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for us. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thank you for listening, and let's have a great Week 11.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/try.